Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we're building up this 1993 Kona FireMountain. Still got the rigid Project 2 fork on it. And even the Oury tyres, so it's an equilibrium on the front and then a propulsion on the rear. We'll be throwing Magura hydraulic rim brakes on it and changing up the drivetrain components and little bits and bobs. As you can see, the X-Edge derailleurs on it are pretty worn. The non-drive side crank arm's got a bit of a wobble to it as well. The seat is also pretty worse for wear, and for some reason doesn't have grips on it, and they're like hand polished. Has X-Lite bar reins on it, which are pretty cool. And the factory top mount shifters. Don't really understand why they put thumbies on like an X-Edge group set, but just one of those things. The paint is this really cool purple that shows up in the sun, but in most shots you'll probably see it's like more of a blue. So here I measure the bike just so you can sort of see. So this is a 56 top tube. That's from center of the seat tube to center of the head tube. And then the seat tube is 49 centimeters from the center of the bottom bracket to the top there. So it is two sizes too small for me, but being an off-road bike, and especially with the long stem as well, I quite like the feel of it. So I tend to go for a little bit small when I'm going for an off-road bike. I do try the Velo Orange clunker bar on it, but I settled for this KT bar. It just feels and looks a whole lot better for me. So this is the KT bar by Magic Components. Just going to check out the chain wear, then we can know if we're going to need like a new chain and cassette and stuff. It's well past its use by date, so we're going to just put that to the side. Throwing a bit of WD-40 through everything just to make sure it's going to come out. Going by the use on the bike and like the grease everywhere, I don't think everything will be rusted, but it sort of pays to just throw a bit there just to be sure. Sure enough, the drive side and the non-drive side crank bolts come out easy enough. And because that's all walled out, it just wobbles off. Don't need the crank puller tool. It's kind of hard to see there, but it's definitely a bit messed up in the taper there. Once we get this drive side off, you can sort of see side by side just the wear on the tapers. So the one on the right is the non-drive side. You can see it's just opened up a bit.
Upper. So it's like a reverse bottom bracket. Reverse to what's normal. So.
Nope. Okay. Every now and then I pull out one of these bottom brackets that are reversed to what they would normally be. So normally it's the fixed side on the drive side and then the adjustable on the non-drive side, but wasn't the case here. Just removing some more of the components now. Actually pretty cool to see just how well preserved like the dust and grime keeps everything. Normally under the front derailleur and reflector mounts and stuff, the paint gets all cracked up and all messed up, but it's cool to see that it was preserved under that. Taking off the rear wheel and rear derailleur now. Really well used. It's actually still in pretty good condition underneath all this grime and everything. So someone's probably just using some strange oil or just over oiling the chain. Brake posts are in good condition. There seems to be a little bit of rust in the bottom bracket shell from that bottom bracket, but it just wipes away, so no real biggie there. Just using some soapy water to get off the rest of the grime and stuff from around the bottom bracket area. Paint looks really cool underneath this. In this shot you can sort of see the seat tube sort of tapering down to the bottom bracket shell there. Chainstay protector is in really good condition as well. So this blue patch here on the seat tube, I don't really know what this was covering. I was expecting to find like a whole bunch of rust underneath it. So there's a few methods of removing, like little bits of spray paint and stuff. I just had some of this dissolve it. So I used that. It's basically just like a citrus oil spray. That just sort of softens up the paint a little bit. And just sort of scrape it off with your fingernail and that. Just cleaning off some more of the grease on the dropouts and stuff. I just sprayed like a little bit of WD-40 on there. Seems to be not too harsh that it damages the paint, but it softens up the grease and everything. Then just a little bit of soapy water to get off the rest of it. Making sure to scrub in the dropout holes and everything. So now you can see, there's my cat in the background. Hey Buster. You can see all the disgusting derailleurs and everything. We're going to be swapping out to some XT 7-speed parts. I really like these. I've got these kicking around, so we use them. The chainrings on the cranks are pretty well worn, but they're a really common BCD, so we should have some to suit. If not, we can just use the ones that came on the Exage cranks, because they're the same BCD, so no real biggie. Those are steel chainrings, so no real XT spec, but other than that, we'll just give the cranks a bit of a polish up. These are anodized cranks, so we'll have to strip the anodizing off before that though. The brakes, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be using Magura rim brakes. These are hydraulic brakes, sorry. These ones are pretty messed up, so we're going to be painting these as well, which actually worked out really well because I wanted to paint them a colour to sort of suit the bike more. So these have a quick release bolt on one side. Not all of them do, but it's good to have this quick release mechanism. It just sort of slides off. Then these pegs here, they sort of help resist the flex that the Maguras can put on the frame. So they just push up on the inside of the seat stays. It can be a little tricky to get out. Then these collars here, you can sort of adjust whereabouts the piston is in location to the brackets. Then the pads just pop out of the piston. Just push on. Kind of strange. They're not really the most secure, but they seem to work really well. So we'll just clean them off and then scrub them up with the Scotch-Brite pad. Then give them a bit of paint. Just using the red Scotch-Brite here, just to scuff them up a bit, sort of feather in that so there's no hard lines when we go over and respray them. The lever, it's just this 1 4mm bolt to pull out, and then the lever blade pops out. So once you pull it out, you can see that plunger there. That sort of just pushes against this here, and then that just pushes all the fluid through. Pretty simple. Doesn't have to screw in or anything. And then we're just going to go with the Scotch-Brite pad on this as well. And then we'll mask everything up after we wipe it down, and then just give it a little bit of paint. I'm going to paint the braces too, and then other parts of the brake, we're going to polish them up. So the piston pieces, the braces, and then a couple other parts to polish. Skipping to the cranks now, we strip off the anodizing and then polish them on the bench polisher. It's just a pretty simple setup I've got. So it did have some pretty deep scratches. You can sort of still see them here, sort of on the right side by the pedal there. But they came out quite nicely. Look a whole lot better than what they used to. So we go through and polish the rest of it now. And that's the end result. I just leave these raw. You can clear coat them if you want, but I prefer just to leave them raw and then use some wax or something. These are the parts that we're paint stripping of the brakes. I decided just to polish them off at the same time as the cranks. It saves me going back and forth. So those came out really well. So you can see here the difference between the really worn chainring and then the one that's in pretty good condition. Really burred out shark's teeth and everything. Just throwing some anti-seize in the crank arm of the chainring bolts now. This little nub on the outer chainring was in the way, so you can just pull those out. It was just fouling on the chainring, the crank arm a little bit there. Just assembling them out. So I did have some alloy chainrings that can suit the crank. I thought I was going to have to use those X-Age ones, which is steel, but I found these, and I think these are XT, if not a really similar level. So I thought I might as well use these. We did use the X-Age inner chainring though. It was just the best condition one that I had. And I think I like a little bit of contrast with the black chainring. Gives a nice look to it. Beautiful looking frame. Just cleaning out the bottom bracket now, and then we'll throw on some grease before rust preventing the inside of the frame. Threads and everything, bottom bracket shell looks in pretty good condition. So I just use a little bit of grease because I'll be spraying some penetrol on the inside of the frame. A little bit of grease in the threads just prevents that from getting stuck in there and everything and making it harder for the bottom bracket to go in. So you can use frame saver or lanolin spray or something like that. Just any kind of rust prevention, spray it in the tubes, shake the frame around. It's a really good thing to do on these steel frames. Even new steel frames, I do it on those as well. Just because there's always moisture in the air and everything. And if you spray something inside the frame, then you can ride through as many puddles as you want. Don't really have to worry about it. Greasing up the headset now, throwing that back in. I hate these little knobs. I did a Cannondale build up recently, and that little spacer, it got stuck to the headset top piece, and I had to drill out that nub in order for it to release. Otherwise it was just messing up the threads on the stereo tube. So yeah, it's not the first time that's happened, and it's going to happen again. So I always just drill those off, file them off, sorry. That little part there, I used some rust kill on it. There was only a couple of spots that I used to go on. Cleaning up the quill stem, throwing some grease and everything. I grease both parts. Some people just choose to use grease on the stem itself, and some people say you just grease the hole. I do both, so just do whatever tickles your pickle. I really like these bars. They do a KT bar 800 as well. I think these ones are 720 millimeters, which I feel is really good for getting in between trees and everything. It's not too wide. Oh, real quick, if you do get Nitto bars, that sticker will fade, so put like some kind of protection over it. I just use like a little bit of 3M clear vinyl. So just throwing in the bottom bracket now. I normally throw in the non-dry side cup like halfway, and that sort of helps guide in the rest of it. When starting the threads, I go the opposite direction until it drops down into like its step of the thread. So you can sort of hear it there, it drops down, and then that way you know you're not going to cross thread it as it starts. And then pretty much when it's all the way in, I just throw in like a little bit of grease there, because there seems to be like a step sort of in between the thread and the end of the cup. So I put like a little bit of grease in there just so like a bunch of water and stuff doesn't end up sitting in there, because you never know. Throwing the cranks on. This came out really nicely. Really happy with that, especially considering how scratched they were. Just going to throw the rear brake on loosely, and we'll get that all lit up and everything. So I had to use a slightly longer hose because the one that was with those brakes was a little bit too short. So I put a new olive on. I'm going to loosely run over reassembly of them. So they can only really go together one way. There are a couple of things that can sort of be reversed and stuff. So this is the quick release lever. So this normally goes on the right hand side. So these have a little circlip, so I think you can swap the lever side to side on this little boss. I'm not sure, I haven't tried it, but it looks like you could. Unsure though. As for the caliper mounts, these can not really be changed around because they're offset. As for the actual fittings, this doesn't really matter, sort of depends on which side you want the hose to go out of. Lever hose, fluid comes in, pushes this and pushes that, and it basically just expands the pistons out. So Magura only has one olive, which is good. They didn't have like a separate one for the rim brake and knot. These are like a low pressure line, so they don't even have like a barb fitting in the end. It's just compression nut, olive, and then hose. And the olive sort of compresses the hose and sort of locks onto there nicely.
once it's all pushed in there.
And if you do like swap the lever left to right or whatever, you don't have to re-bleed them. So similar to Shimano in that sense. So these can wear, as I found out by my mate James, and then they sort of get like locked in place and stuff. They get like ribs in all of them and then get like compressed in funny spots. I do have some new ones of these, but I'm just going to show assembly with these ones, and then I'll change out the brake pads and stuff. So we're just going to set them in the middle position for the time being. You can set them one way or the other. Depending on how wide the rim is, you can put these colors one way or the other. Because you want the pads as close to the rim as possible, like for the best lever feel and stuff, but you can adjust things at the lever as well. And then these, you'll have to adjust these as well, but just throw it in there loosely. We'll need the brace on there as well. So just do this up all loosely for now. And then that's pretty much the same for the opposite side. So when bleeding the brakes, you want the lever to not be pushing the plunger in, so you want like a little bit of wiggle room there. So put this in most of the way, and then put it through, tighten it onto it, and then go down. There's a little gap there. See a tiny little gap, so if you did tighten it down all the way, chances are it just won't be able to lock nicely. You don't want really too much tension on it. So when bleeding the brakes, technically you can bleed it from either end. I think it seemed to work out better bleeding down from the lever, just because I think it was like a little bit easier to get out all the air bubbles, because you can put in the other bolt like down at the caliper and that will sort of seal up the system, rather than here if you're bleeding upwards you sort of have to keep pushing liquid out as you're doing that bolt in. But yeah, I tried it both ways and it's just my thoughts, and then just rinsing it all off. I just used some Shimano mineral oil. It seems like Magura has their own specific one, but I've used Shimano mineral oil in them before and it seems to work pretty good. I hear that trials riders used to use, or still use, water in them for like a bit of a faster lever feel, because it's like a lower viscosity fluid, right? So yeah, I probably wouldn't use it. It has different, boiling temps and everything like that, but Shimano mineral oil seems to work really well. Here you can sort of see how the pegs work. So those just sort of resist the brake flexing outwards as well as the brace. Certainly having the brace there makes the brake a little bit more fiddly to set up. So you can sort of see here, I've got one side about adjusted right, just trying to get the toe dialed in there a little bit. I go back through and readjust everything, but this is just sort of with the tyre off, it's a bit easy to see the adjustments and stuff. So you want to get it about right and then push the pegs outwards, but to do that you have to loosen off the brace, because that bolt goes all the way through to the pegs. Kind of finicky, but not too difficult, I wouldn't say. I really like the lever feel of Magura brake. They're showing braking too. So I'm going to throw some Oury grips on it, but they don't have really bar ends, so you need something in the end. It's pretty common to use a coin. These are our 10-cent coin. Got a Māori korodu on one side of it, then a whole bunch of colonisation on the other side, so I'm going to use this side. I use some hairspray, or what was the other spray that I used? Hairspray, or there's like grip glue and that sort of stuff. It's just like a light tacking spray. Also use like isopropyl alcohol or something like that. Going to the derailleurs now.
This is the front derailleur It's a bottom pull that's been converted to a top pull. Similar to an old Trek 8000, I think it was. So this would stop the cable outer, and then the cable end would be bolted to the frame somewhere. And then that in turn would, yeah, activate the front derailleur. So this is just screwed in to the front cable hole. This one is also pretty tidy, just some scratches here and stuff, but not too bad overall. Just take the pulley wheels out and give them a clean. 3mm here.
I normally just use a bit of WD-40 or some degreaser or something to clean up the pulley wheels and everything. Just scrub off or peel off most of the thicker stuff, and then a little bit of degreaser and wipe it down. Works really well. And then when putting them together, use like some kind of light oil or like white lithium grease. I use a spray one, which works really well because it's a nice viscosity. It doesn't seem like anything really damages these jockey wheels though. They just sort of wear out over time anyway. Some people don't even service them, they just chuck them out and then get new ones. But these didn't have too much slop in them, so there's not really much point in just being wasteful. Just clean this out with a bit of degreaser. And then this is just some soapy water just to spray off all the excess and everything. I give them a bit of a scrub after using the degreaser. I think that gets them up pretty nicely. The front derailleur was in really good condition anyway. We're going to hit both of them with a little bit of autosol on some of these alloy parts. Then I remembered I got the bench set up, so I might as well just use that. I would normally just use a Dremel or something with a bit of autosol, because it gets into some of the tight crevices and stuff that the bench grinder, or the bench polisher, sorry, doesn't get into. So if you don't have a Dremel, definitely recommend getting one if you're going to do some restorations and stuff, because they're really good at polishing up most of the parts. Apart from like cranks or something like that, you can technically do it with a Dremel, but it's kind of a little bit more finicky. You'd have to get some of the slightly bigger polishing wheels, but perfectly doable. Just throwing the jockey wheels back in now. I didn't show it, but yeah, I just used like a little bit of light oil or some white lithium spray. Seems to work pretty good.
Sometimes shit just fucking annoys me, you know? Like, life, huh?
So once you drop the bolt on the ground and struggle to find it, eventually you will find it or raid another derailleur. And then finish off the pulley wheel install. Chuck those little cap things back on. Then that bolt's too long, so we'll go through the stash and try to find a shorter one. I've got like a couple of little drawers full of M5 bolts and stuff, so this is a 16mm one, which looks like it'll be a good length for it.
Cool. Two nice looking derailleurs. Do these pedals that I want to do something with too. I don't know if I should paint the cage. You can't remove it, so it might be tricky, but I don't know how it would look with like fresh black paint on a cage. And it might be a little tricky to polish in all the rest of it. Really cool MKS BM10 pedals. I'll get rid of that rust and service the bearings as well. These take you need like the MKS pedal tool. I've got a couple of these because I thought I lost my one. But you can sort of use some poly grips or whatever you want to call them in your country. as well. They have like a sweet little curve to them. You might not be able to see that. There you go, you can see a bit better now. Pretty cool, man.
So the wheels we'll be using on the bike are these Pulstar ones. You might have seen them before on the Alpine Stars build. We've since sold the Alpine Stars, and then we ended up picking up the Nishiki, but I kept these wheels for something else. And I think these purple hubs will look really cool on the Kona, so we're going to service them up. Just pulling out. I think they ran really nicely on the Alpine Stars. They ended up being like a little bit creaky because I had the spokes a little bit too loose because I didn't want to over tighten them, because, you know, old nice anodized hubs probably a little bit weak by now. You can see a tiny little mark in one of the bearing cones. Not worth replacing really, just for that tiny little mark. These are 7-speed hubs, so we're just going to rock a 7-speed cassette. It keeps it like in the age anyway. We don't really need anything more, because we're going to keep the triple rings up front, so 21 speed. New grease and everything should make these run really nicely for a really long time. Just making sure not to over tension them. I normally use the vise for this. It sort of keeps everything like in a good spot. Then sort of just go back and forth, taking it out of the vise and everything, giving it like a wiggle test. So you can sort of see these rims did used to be purple anodized. And show you the purple anodizing. Would have been cool when the rims were that colour. So to keep it sort of period, and I want to do sort of like a nice mix of old school with like a little bit of new flair to it. So we're going to be using Panaracer smoke darts. So the one on the right or the bottom of the screen is the smoke, and then the top one is the dart, so the dart goes in the front. These are really cool classic tyre. They're good in the mud and everything. They don't roll very nicely on the road, and there's definitely better handling tyres. These have like a really hard edge to them, so sort of like leaning into corners and stuff, you do feel them a bit, compared to like newer tyres and stuff that have a bit more of a rounded edge. But they look really cool, so that's pretty much why we're doing it. Pretty sweet. I think I got the tan wall dart from Bike In for like $16 or something like that, plus shipping, and then this tan wall smoke was locally from New Zealand for about $60 or something, but normally they retail like $90 each tyre, which is quite expensive. Going back to the pedals now. I've never seen this cone nut. I've had a few MKS pedals, but not this one in particular. But it came undone pretty easily. Okay. Just pulling out the axle now. See some old honey-looking grease on there. Just going to clean up the axle. Just throw it in the vise gently, and then use a wire wheel on the drill. Just cleans that up. And then we'll wipe that down and then spray some Penetrol on it to prevent it from rusting. You can just use some clear coat or something, but I like Penetrol. It's sort of, it penetrates into the rust like a little bit as well. It doesn't just leave like a film on the outside. So it does a really good job at preventing rust in the future. So cleaning up the pedals now. It's kind of awkward to get in the inside there underneath the cage. The cone nuts look in really good condition, so the bearing should run pretty smoothly. The body itself is in pretty good condition. It will need like a little bit of a light polish, but we're going to scuff up and paint the body first, the cage first, because otherwise if we polish that body, there's going to be polish and everything everywhere, and it's going to be pretty tricky to get it off 100%. So to mask off these little rivets here, I'm just using like a little bit of grease. You can use Vaseline or something like that, because then you can just paint over that and then when the paint is dry you can wipe off the grease, and then the paint obviously won't stick to those parts. I use grease because I've got blue grease, so it's a little bit easier to see where I'm sort of masking. There is like a masking fluid as well, but it's normally white, so it's a little bit harder to see. It's like a latex masking fluid. So just spraying the matte black, so it goes on gloss, but it dries to this really nice matte finish. I'm just showing you wiping off the grease now. Does a really good job masking it. Looks pretty good. Yeah, really nice. We can go over this with the Dremel and polish up these little bits, but not really needed. And then it's kind of high risk if you're polishing something that is really close to something that was just painted. It's just easy to burn through that. So just hand polishing the body and the little pedal caps. Just like a little bit of aerosol and a rag. Going through with the grease now, and then you're going to throw some balls back in these pedals and get the axle back in there. I wish I had the longer little extension for the grease gun. It would make it easier to get in these little parts, but just adjusting the cones now, and then putting the washer on, and then the lock nut. It's the little washer.
Somewhere around there.
So this is just a 12mm lock nut. So same sort of thing with the wheel, just take it out of the vise and then see how it feels by hand. And then once it's all done, locking the pedal cap back on with the little MK spanner. Cool little tool. They're pretty cheap as well. Blue Lug normally has that pedal cap spanner in stock. They came out really nicely. I'm glad I went through the effort to do these up. I think the outer cage on the end there could have been like a little bit nicer if I went through and like filed and smoothed them down. But it's got that writing there that I didn't really want to remove. I'm throwing the cassette on now. This is just a 11 to 28 tooth. It'll give us plenty of range with the triple up the front. And now you see one of the big issues with these Magura brakes. When you've got them set in for like narrow rims, you can't really get a tyre in there. Unless you sort of deflate the tyre and then shove it in, but just take the brake off because I didn't have these like set up. So this is the little bag of part that I got from my mate James. Thanks heaps James for these parts. It's like some new brake pads and the new little collars for the brakes. These are the stock Magura ones. See the collar there, like in really nice condition. So Cool Stop do brake pads for these. They do them in like the salmon compound, which work really great. Those are the ones that I used on the Specialized the full suspension bike that you might have seen in a previous video. They work really well. So just throwing the derailleurs on now, and then we'll go through and chuck a chain on. And the pedals, and then there's just a few little things to button up before you go ride it. So you might notice here that the pedal body I didn't polish up as well as I polished the cranks, but we're going to be riding on the pedals, so they're not going to look that polished for long anyway. So that spray there that I was putting on the chain is just to get off like the transport grease. So they put like this thick sort of oily stuff on to prevent the chains from rusting, and that just attracts like a lot of dirt and stuff. So take that off with a bit of degreaser or WD-40 or something before putting the chain on. And now we've got the quick link on, the chain's all sized, we'll lube up the chain. This is Finish Line wet lube. I use this because you never know when it's going to rain in New Zealand. Throwing on the cables now. One of the things I didn't have, well, I ordered before I built the bike, but they didn't show up in time, is the hose guides for the Magura brake. So because it's like a hydraulic line, you do need sort of the disc brake or the cable guides that are for hoses instead of cables. So you can get them on AliExpress or something. They're pretty cheap. They just didn't show up in time. This is just like a little trick I use to sort of angle or guide the cable in a decent curve. Otherwise it sort of just springs up a bit. You can sort of bend it by hand, but sometimes it doesn't always stay. So just use that to sort of hold it in place as it forms a little bit. So the cable just flopping around there. At the end of the video you do see the little cable guide that I use. One of the last things to do is to tidy up the seat. So it's really just this end part here. I just want this to be a bit more tucked up, so we're just going to re-glue it. Also give the seat post like a little bit of polish with some Autosol. It doesn't really have deep scratches in it, so I don't really have to go too extensive with it. The glue that I use for the seat is this ADOS spray adhesive. This is the ultra high strength one. You don't need it, but like if it's there, just get it because it works really well. Then I just use some pegs and stuff to sort of form it in shape. Then that's it overnight. Looks pretty good. There's a couple little spots that I want to go through again and form it, but you can't do like everything at once. It's a bit too finicky. Looks really good. There's a couple little tears and stuff in it, but looks really good overall. And the bike's got like a little bit of patina anyway, so. This is the bike all completely finished. We're going to go take it for a bit of ride and stuff, but enjoy these little clips. I'm so happy with how the bike turned out. You see I've got a lot of seat posts, but it feels really good. I'm so stoked with the look of it, like the back sweep bars and everything. Okay, I'll see you at the end of the video. Bye.
So I've wanted one of these old Konas in a decent size for a really long time. It sounds like I say that about everything, but it's honestly just so hard to find an old bike in New Zealand in a size that you want. So technically this is too small for me, but the bigger ones, I think there's been like one Kona explosive that's like a good year that Michelle had down in Nelson, but it was bad timing for me. All the other ones have been like a bit later, like the 118 with like the chunkier top tube, and I think this one with like the really skinny top tube. It's like one of my favorite. And as well as that, that explosive was just black. So it wasn't really like an alluring colour for me. It could look really cool with like some 10 wheel tyres and like this and that, but But I'm glad I didn't grab that because it showed up. This is a nicer colour. And the size, like with the long stem, with these bars feel beautiful. As well as the larger size ones, they look like a bit goopy. The entrance is a bit overgrown. So I think this size is kind of like a really cool, I can make it fit size. So for those of you who haven't tried the Magura hydraulic rim brakes, and you get the opportunity to, like, I don't think I'd spend too much money on them, but like I would get new brake pads, especially if you can find some cool stock ones for them. I wouldn't say they're tricky to work on, they're just a bit finicky, just like cantilever brakes. Just once you've messed with them, like I wouldn't say they're foolproof, you could definitely mess them up, but like all the parts, as you might have seen in the video, they can only sort of go one way. Now obviously they wouldn't work as well as discs in the wet, but they work really well. I've got heaps of adjustment, so even if your frame's like a bit wider, different width of rim, saw spider web, that sort of thing, you can adjust them to suit. And like the different, like all the lever adjustment and everything as well, really cool. So for rim brakes, the Magura hydraulic are definitely one finger brakes, especially off-road. Definitely pinch the front there a little bit. I got them down pretty low. No pinch flat, which is good. Hey bird. Got it a little muddy. Hey buddies.
go. Hey, buddy. Holy crap, it's so beautiful here. So since filming the video, the frame hose clips have shown up and they look pretty good. Cable or the hose is like loose in there so it can shift a little bit, but it looks all tidy. That GT, the Tequila Sunrise GT in the background is not mine, so don't expect a video on that. Here's a little collection of my to-do pile. So you think you know about the rock combo, you should know about the disc converted avalanche. And I recently picked up another Cannondale. So that's the fixed gear one in the background. Still haven't blown up the eccentric bottom bracket. But this is a cool early M300. Pretty sweet. That's all for the video for today. Thanks for checking it out. The next build is going to be that specialized rock combo. I've got a nice Chris King rear hub for it and a couple other little cool parts for it. And then I've got an on-one inbred 29er, which I'm going to do as a single speed bike because I just really want to do that. So thanks for checking it out and I'll see you soon. Bye.